Hey everyone, so my name is Madison. This is Beth here, and we're here to talk to you guys today about the teen addiction and the cycle. And in case that you missed this because you couldn't make the 3 o'clock time, it's going to be recorded on my new page on TCPS. It's under Student Services. Look for my name, Madison Elliott. I'm going to tag my email in the chat as well. Beth is from
currently at Talbot County Health Department in the prevention office.
So I'm gonna go ahead and share my, and also any questions, comments, feel free to put it in the chat. Doing the webinar that we're all on right now, we can't have participants kind of like speak up. It doesn't work that way for some reason. So just questions, the Q&A at the bottom, the chat, and then we're more than happy to answer any questions, comments at the end of this. I'm gonna share my screen. And then slideshow. I can start. Okay, I'm gonna put this up here so we can see it. All right, so understanding addiction in your teen and the dangerous cycle of addiction. All right, so first, before we get into talking about teen addiction and addiction cycle, I want to go over the Good Samaritan Law. I'm not sure if any of you have, heard about it. It's kind of like a forgotten law in a way, and how the Good Samaritan Law protects kids in drug-related situations. So the Good Samaritan Law encourages adults, kids to summon aid in the event of a drug or alcohol health emergency or overdose and preventing overdose deaths. So according to Maryland law, if you help someone in good faith who is in need of medical assistance from a drug or alcohol medical emergency, you and that person that you are helping are immune from any criminal prosecution. So this is saying that you are better off calling 911, you're better off staying and helping versus running away in this situation. If you stay and help, stay and call, you will not get in trouble. And what that immunity looks like. So you won't get in trouble, charged for administering dangerous substances, possession with intent or controlled paraphernalia, minor possession of alcohol, obtaining or giving alcohol to an underage person. And this is a very important law to kind of like remind your kids about, because they may come across their peers or anywhere else, and you see someone lying on the floor and they took something and they're having a seizure or they overdosed or there's foam coming out of their mouth, and super scary for your child to experience, but it does happen, and it happens a lot more nowadays. So we definitely need to be aware of the Good Samaritan Law and how your children can feel more safer in that situation, and encourage them to call 911 to try to help in that situation. They will not get in trouble. All right, so teen substance use. So obviously nobody's safe from addiction. Many young people suffer from substance abuse every year. One of the most difficult parts about being a teen can be searching for belonging and validation. Unfortunately, some kids don't find that and make the decision to start using drugs as an escape. But recognizing these early signs and symptoms of drug use and addiction is a very important step to stopping addiction in its tracks before your child becomes addicted, continues to use, which it's very, very hard once your kid decides to use and becomes addicted. It's very difficult for them to stop. So some common signs and symptoms of teenage substance abuse can be changes in sleep habits, eating habits, and friend groups. So sleeping too much, not sleeping at all, up in the middle of the night doing something not in their normal routine, eating habits, not eating or eating a lot more than they usually do, and their friend groups. So they used to hang out with so-and-so, and lately you see them hanging out with a whole different kind of people who you may not be so familiar with. lack of interest in socializing with friends, family, school, extracurriculars. So they're not wanting to hang out with their friends or family. They kind of want to isolate themselves a little bit. They might skip out on if they play sports, skip out on that or any other extracurricular activities that they normally do. They might skip out on school to smoke or hang out with whoever who's using to do it. Lack of self-care. So they start not kind of taking care of their appearance very well. Poor academic performance. You see that your child is, struggling in school to keep up their grades all of a sudden. Anxiety, depression, they become more easily irritated, frustrated, they're in bad moods more frequently, mood swings, and they're more secretive. So they're not as open to you anymore as they used to be, and they kind of seem like they're hiding something here and there from you. So why are they using? And Beth is going to tell you more about that.
Okay, why are they using? That's really the question that most of us wonder. Usually we see in young people that are using or starting out using, there's some levels of depression. Might not be, very serious depression, but just feeling down, feeling upset, or high levels of anxiety. And we have really, our kids these days are, as many of us are, very anxious about what's going on with their life, with school, with friends, with the virus, with their families. Maybe there's job loss in the family. So we have really high levels of anxiety among our young people right now. And certainly if you're depressed or if you're anxious, there are substances out there that could make you not feel that for a while. And so that is often why they may try one type of drug or another and like the way that feels. And, it takes away my anxiety, it calms me down. I'm going to use that again. Peer pressure, we've always heard about that, and it is real, especially for young people. Middle school seems to be the age where they really start to feel a lot of the peer pressure. And we're also seeing trauma. Much of what we're seeing in people later in life who have used substances most of their life report trauma early on in their childhood or sometime during their childhood. So that is becoming a real link and something that we look for when we see somebody using substances. When a young person uses, the drug distorts their perception of pleasure, and the development of their brain is changed. The pleasure center of the brain is triggered, so it causes the user to feel good, to feel this is something that feels good to me. It feels like a good experience to me. And then after using, dopamine rushes to the brain and then twists the pleasures that will often never be the same. So certain drugs, depending on the drug, may give them an experience that's very pleasurable and favorable until they come down. Or it may give them an experience that over time can affect their ability to feel pleasure in that part of the brain. We need to keep in mind that the adolescent brain really is not completely developed until the early to mid 20s. So there are, even if somebody is using, we certainly don't want them starting to use early on, because that will definitely start to affect brain development. But we, even if they're starting in middle school or high school, we can see that brain development of those higher learning areas and higher processing areas in the brain are going to be affected. And there is also no high that will be as strong as the first. And because of this, the user will crave more with every use. Sorry, you want to finish that for me?
Yeah, so there's no high that will be strong enough, or that's the first use. And because of this, the user will crave more with every use, because they are trying to achieve the same high feeling they experienced with the first use. So your kid takes that first smoke of marijuana, they will be at their highest. They'll be at their highest. And every use after that, they won't feel that same high. And that's that's part of what their brain is trying to tell them is, oh, like that's why they also continue to smoke as much as they possibly will do, because they're trying to get that high feeling. And that's also why, in a way, that marijuana is considered a gateway drug, because even with marijuana, that first smoke is the highest you'll ever get, and after that, your brain will want to feel that way again. Do you want to add on to that?
No, just to emphasize that, what we see in the treatment world sometimes is that people will say, I was chasing that high, I was chasing that first high. And craving is often one of the first early signs that somebody is progressing into being dependent on that drug. Okay. Sorry, allergies here.
No, you're good. I get it.
Okay, why kids won't ask for help? Well, we know teenagers are, their emotions are often very challenging, very different, very heightened. And asking when you're asking for help when you're vulnerable can be very difficult for any of us to do. And especially for someone who is fragile or insecure as a teen, it can be more difficult. Excuse me. Go ahead for a minute. I'm sorry.
No, you're good.
Allergies.
So some of these things may look like fear. So the possibility of failure, some teens won't come to the realization that they need or ask for help. Some aspects to the failure may relate to family, friend groups, isolation. They don't want to get their family or friends involved. They don't want to embarrass themselves, because they'll feel that way. And also, they don't also want to. They want to escape from reality so bad. They're so scared that they don't want to. They ignore that realization in their head that, hey, like, I need help, but they want to keep convincing themselves that they don't need help. Denial, so unable to clearly see their own substance use issues, which is what I just talked about, the realization of coming to, hey, I really need help. They're in denial of it. Depression, lack of motivation to seek help. They're super depressed, super sad. They're also not motivated at all to seek help. So those are the three big aspects, big reasons why your teen will ask for help. And that's why it's very important to reach out and to keep continuing to reach out to our kids if you feel like they really need help, because the more and more you bug them about it, the more and more they'll hopefully come to that realization and they'll talk to you.
Okay, what can you do with a parent? And Madison just alluded to some of that. The best approach is to try to reach out in a loving, caring, concerned way. We don't want to make accusations because we don't want to isolate or push away our child even further. Because of the denial, they may already be thinking, oh, my parents are getting on my back. It's really not that bad. I can handle this. So we don't want to do anything more to put any more distance between us and our child, obviously. But we do want to ask questions, try to understand them and your responses instead of being judgmental. So we maybe try to ask open-ended questions. Can you tell me about what's happening? Can you tell me how you're feeling? Or using I messages, I'm noticing that you're more tired, or I'm noticing that your appetite seems different. We don't want to use closed-ended questions, especially we know teens like to answer yes, no, and we want to encourage them to talk and to really try to figure out what's going on. And this doesn't have to be a one-time isolated incident. If we're noticing things and we start early on and say, I'm noticing a couple things and I'm a little concerned, and then keep that conversation going. I know we talked a couple days ago and now it seems like you're still feeling tired. Is there something I should be worried about? What can you tell me? Those kind of things. So, keep asking questions. It's really one of our main jobs as parents oftentimes is to ask questions and try to kind of figure out what's going on, especially if someone's reluctant to talk or come forward. I always advise knowing your resources. There's nothing wrong with being prepared for a situation that, hopefully will never occur and won't have to be addressed. But we have, there's inpatient and outpatient treatment available. There are centers where people can go and get detoxed from substances. Usually a hospital ER is a place to go if somebody is under the influence and very sick. at the time. There's individual therapy, family therapy, group therapy. There's some self-help groups and recovery support groups. But I always advise parents to know what's around in your area. The health department does have an addictions unit that has peer support people available. Also in our community, we're very lucky to have Midshore Behavioral Health, and they have probably the best resource guide out there that will help you not only to look into different types or modes of therapy, but also what do you need to do ahead of time to try to get your loved one into treatment. So Midshore Behavioral Health, and I think we referred to them before in our talks, but you can look them up also on the internet, and it's about a 100-page resource guide that they put out every year.
And also, if you guys go to my new page on the TCPS website, I have a link. It's under Called It Goes Purple. It's a brand new website that just came out around September. And if you go on there, just ask you, a few questions. And it only takes about not even 5 minutes, and you will get all the possible resources that in this county, in Talbot County, and in other counties that you can go to for help, depending on your situation. So it's super great, super easy, super quick. I encourage you to go on it if you need to. All right, so the dangerous cycle of addiction. So addiction does not happen overnight, but can involve in these 5 stages: initial use, abuse, tolerance, dependence, and then addiction. And we're going to talk about each of these 5 stages and how, initial use can go right to addiction. All right, so initial use is the first time you're using a substance or a drug. And possible factors leading to somebody taking their first or using for the first time could be, physical abuse, emotional abuse, sexual abuse, peer pressure from their friends, depression, anxiety, feeling really lonely and isolated, and family history of addiction. It can run in the family. Abuse. So substance abuse is when the user is using a drug on a more consistent and reoccurring basis. So for an example, a person is at a bar and has had one more drink than they should. They may appreciate the way that the last drink made them feel, and they start having that one last drink. They keep saying, "Oh, I'm just going to have one last drink." And they say it 2 or 3 more times more, which is building their tolerance to alcohol. And that's what abuse is. That's when you're not quite at the next stage yet, but you're abusing it. You're consistently using it more than just a couple times a week or one time a day. You're using consistently. And there's a thing called illicit drugs, so obviously abuse begins with the first use, but some of these drugs, so illicit drugs like heroin, cocaine, and LSD, these are called illicit drugs. And obviously there's some gray areas like tobacco and prescription meds that can also be known as illicit drugs because of their addictive nature as well. So with the heroin and cocaine, you are addicted. No questions asked. You take that one time, you're addicted. That's that. It's gonna be very, 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 very difficult to stop with heroin, cocaine, LSD. And then obviously it depends on prescription meds and tobacco, but it can happen. It all depends on how your brain responds to these gray area drugs here. But with heroin, cocaine, and LSD, you're addicted, just like that first use. All right, tolerance.
Okay, tolerance. So, as Madison referred to with the having one more drink of alcohol, when a consistent amount of a drug is no longer producing the desired effect or the expected effect or high, so a larger amount is needed to reach that effect. And this may happen, most people might be familiar with if you're taking a medication for allergies, say, and it's prescribed and it's normal, but all of a sudden you say, well, this isn't working like it used to. Maybe I need to take one more. So you take one more than you usually do, and then your tolerance rises up to that so that it will take that level or more for you to get the desired response. And that's what happens with basically any drug. So that is why many prescribed medications are very carefully monitored, because they don't want a patient to be too long on that drug and then develop a tolerance. So after taking a drug for a longer period of time, the pleasure center of the brain becomes compromised and the receptors become diminished. So it causes the brain to stop producing the chemicals in our pleasure centers of our brain, the things that allow us to enjoy everyday pleasures. So the user will need to not only use more of the drug to get the same effect, but also to keep withdrawal symptoms away, leading to dependence. And this is very commonly what keeps people using, is that fear of getting sick. And some drugs produce more of a withdrawal than others. Heroin and some of the opioids, it's a nasty withdrawal. It lasts several days. It's like having a very, very bad case of the flu. Withdrawal from alcohol or like barbiturate kind of drugs, sedative kind of drugs, can be fatal. So people feel like they don't want to feel sick, and that's what keeps them in that cycle of addiction. Okay. Withdrawal symptoms can include, these are usually the most common: sweating, vomiting, nausea, headaches, shaking, anxiety, and depression. It used to be a rule of thumb. It's a little bit different nowadays because we have people using several types of drugs at one time. We don't usually just have a straight heroin user, a straight alcohol user, a straight cocaine user. But a rule of thumb generally is, if a person is using a depressant drug, when they go into withdrawal, they will start to be more high energy. It may look like a higher energy or a stimulated response. And you'll see some of these are, shaking, obviously, sweating, vomiting, their body is just kind of doing everything it can to try to survive until they could get another dose of that drug. Okay. So after abuse comes dependence, and dependence is defined mostly as a physical condition, when somebody fails to function normally without having used drugs. So it can lead to addiction, but it's not the same as addiction. Addiction, when somebody crosses into addiction, not only do they have a physical dependence, but they have a brain issue, as we've been talking about throughout this. It's a disease of the brain. So the main difference is that addiction is when the user has a compulsion to use. In fact, that word compulsion, somebody's so compelled to use, it's an overwhelming urge to use a drug. That is usually one of the defining signs that somebody has become addicted. Whereas dependence is when the user relies on it to function normally or to feel normal. Okay. Okay, addiction. We know from studies on alcohol use that addiction is a disease. It is defined as a progressive, debilitating, chronic, often fatal disease. If not treated, it will very likely become fatal at some point. If it is characterized by what we've been talking about: tolerance, compulsion, physical dependence, and a loss of control over use. So here are some of those signs here. It becomes irresistible to the person. So they're using more than they intended. We're talking loss of control, and they may say, oh, I know, I can only have 2 drinks, or I can only have a couple of these pills. And then they have more than they intended. Not that their intentions were wrong. Yeah, they may have definitely gone into a situation saying, I need to cut back, I need to control this, and they can't do so. So it's the inability to stop using. The cravings are just the cravings, and just the compulsion. We keep using that word, but that's just such a definitive word in this process. They're just not able to stop using, and this is what drives them to search out the drugs time and time again. Continually recovering from using. Again, I use too much, then I'm sleeping more, I'm not feeling well, I'm having physical problems, or I'm having, I'm not showing up to work or to school. my family, I'm having problems with my family. Maybe they're even starting to have some legal problems. So, the inability to stop and constantly recovering, or, trying to just deal with the consequences of their use. Spending an alarming amount of time using a substance. And I would also add to this, and trying to secure that supply of that substance. Many of these have a short kind of I don't know what the word is, range of effects or time of effects, where, some of the opiate drugs last maybe, 4 hours, 5 hours, and then you start to go into that withdrawal. Others leave your system quicker, others stay in your system longer. Alcohol leaves your system within an hour or two. So if a person is drinking as their drug of choice, every couple hours, they have to have a drink, or they're going to eventually start going into withdrawal. So it's constantly that balance, and that securing the supply, searching for the supply, using, and then getting back right into that routine again. Craving, we've talked a lot about that, but that is really what drives these overwhelming cravings for that substance, and the tolerance, where it takes more and more and more to just stave off that withdrawal and stave off that craving, and lack of judgment in how to use the substance. So it becomes almost normal. People that become addicted, they don't think it's wrong, and they might, because of tolerance, they may even feel more normal when they're using, and when they're not using, they feel off kilter, or they don't feel well. So it's really quite the process, but they oftentimes, because of that denial as well, will say, well, I'm not, I don't use any more than anybody else does. And so that would be more of a lack of judgment in how to use and appropriately.
All right, so I'm going to put my email in a chat for you guys if you have any questions you think of later. If you have any questions, feel free to comment now. I haven't looked at the chat or anything. I don't see anything. But feel free to do that now if you need to. I'm gonna put my chat email for everybody. All right, and like I said, spread the word about, the Good Samaritan Law. Remind your kids. It's really, really important message in law that's been forgotten, that everyone needs to be more aware of. Definitely check out my page on TCPS. Like I said, it's under Student Services. And then you go to the link on the side, and it should say addiction/substance use. Click on that, and then there's my page filled with resources. It's great. I don't see any questions, but also all these. So if you know someone who wanted to come and couldn't make it, all of these are recorded. All of these are also shown on my page and on social media of TCPS. So, feel free to share this video with coworkers, with family, friends, peers. And definitely email me if you guys have any questions. Thank you, Beth. You did a great job. Thank you.
Sorry, I was happy.
Oh, you're good. It's okay. All right, guys. Thank you.